This is the video where I finally deduce what is the biggest swing state right now in the entire United States. And it's not where the merch is represented. The merch comes from Denver, which is obviously in Colorado. Colorado has actually shown signs of being a swing state, but not recently. You could see overwhelmingly voted against Trump in both elections by double digits. 2012 and 2008 had fun being tipping points, but still overwhelmingly voting for Obama. And it was a bit Republican leaning before that, but, still a swing state. It's tough to really say for Colorado what happened. It's changed so many times politically in the past bit, but it's taken a hard shift left. And even though it's, may no longer be in a safe column, or may not be in a safe column yet, it's still overwhelmingly a state that is just really safe for Democrats. I mean, it's in between Illinois and New York, which meant it actually voted to the left of Illinois, which just feels illegal to say. And it's true. But in this video, we're going to figure out what the biggest swing state is. And we're going to look at several legislative elections. We're going to look at several gubernatorial elections. We're going to look at several Senate elections. We're going to look at presidential elections. We're going to look at everything. And, establish contenders. And eliminate them as time goes on. This is a challenge. Who can win? First of all, one trait that I like to look for in swing states is states that swing back and forth, quite often in elections. Like back and forth and back and forth. I could go to 2012. Problem is that if you include Florida, Ohio, and Iowa as swing states, which they certainly were back in 2012, it would be a bit outdated considering the margins. Because it was clear in 2016 Ohio and Iowa weren't swing states, and this was really doubled down in 2020. 2020 was still too early for Florida, but you could tell it was shifting more to the right. And then 2024, it becomes very obvious that Florida is a safe Republican state. And same for Ohio and Iowa. Becomes very obvious. I mean, Florida votes in line with Alaska perfectly. That feels weird to say. So, now that you've eliminated, those states out, and again, these aren't certainly the only ones because they want to gather up states on every level. But one thing you do want to look at a swing state is states that swing back and forth. Now we're going to look at a presidential election map. A presidential election predictions map. Not to make predictions, but to see which state or, or not, maybe, because I want a map that has every state. Okay, create your own map, which we're not going to do. We're not going to do. We're just going to take a blank map and find out what state's the ultimate swing state. And what better way to do that than taking a look at this elections map. So to find the ultimate swing state, that's what you gotta do. And again, or what we could do is show a third party and then just show that to decorate out the states that we're including. So anyway, for states that go back, that went back and forth from 2020 to 2024, which will include all the from 2016 to 2020 as well, you have Nevada, Arizona, Georgia in the south, and Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania in the north. So, and again, these aren't the only states that we're including, but these are states that we're showing as, contenders. And then you might say, well, North Carolina might not have voted blue since 2008, which was a blue wave election. But it's been pretty close. It's consistently been in the lean category. It voted for Trump by 3.7%, then voted for Trump by 1.3%, then voted for Trump by 3.2%. And certainly voted in this election left of other swing states like Arizona, Nevada, and you'd be very right to notice that. So I would say that North Carolina, at least for now, is a swing state. And then if you're going into, other chambers of Congress, you might be like, well, what about the Senate? Because in 2020, Collins carried Maine. Thus, even though it's a traditionally Democratic state, voted for Harris by 6.9%. It has a split congressional delegation. Only a very few select amount of states have split delegations at this point. So you got to have Maine in there. That's what one might say. And then you can go look at the map of legislative control at the statewide level too, to find some swing states. And states that are split on the statewide level, you could say, to a reasonable extent. Swing states, oh my God. Like, look at where there's a divided government. And most of these we've already highlighted. They were established in Michigan and Minnesota. We already have Michigan. Well, maybe we could throw Minnesota on because they do have a divided government. We'll analyze. Virginia. So, why not? Again, we're just establishing contenders. There are some states where I'm going to veto. Alaska's a coalition. And even though they did have a Democratic representative after 2022, that went the way of the dodo bird after 2024. So, no, Alaska's not a swing state. And Vermont, we know how blue it is. Kentucky and Kansas, we know how red they are. So those states will not be counted for purple states. But I might throw in New Hampshire. It's been close, and they also have Republican trifecta, yet 2 Democratic senators. So, again, it's crazy. Oh, and finally, I guess we're not going to do districts, only swing states. So, there you have it. Those are the swing states that we are going to be looking at. And, now that you have the space of swing states, which one is the biggest? So we're going to be doing tiers where every state that survives gets it, and every state that doesn't, we put into a respective category. So it's like, this is like a last to leave gold challenge wins. And every time there's a challenge, then you get put into a category, and we bump you up for every tier that you are until only one state remains out of all of them. This is going to be lots of fun. And I think the first thing that we're going to look for is presidential election margins. Because obviously, if you're not close in a presidential election, it's going to be really hard for me to keep you. Looking at it, Maine consistently votes for the Democratic Party. Consistently. And by larger margins than its nearby neighbor of New Hampshire as well. New Hampshire is closer than Maine usually. And considering that there's question marks about whether or not New Hampshire is even a swing state, again, Maine seemingly is based off the fact that it has one Republican senator. And then you look at the, Maine, internal races. Because the Maine Senate is 20-15 in favor of Democrats. And, for a while, it was even bigger. Like, Republicans have not held the Maine Senate since before the 2018 elections. And the Maine House of Representatives, I looked up the wrong election. The Maine House of Representatives, it might have, it was Republican for a while. No, Democrat for a while. And we can see, even now, 76-63. 76-73. Democrats still have an outright majority in the Maine House. But it's close. So, then you have to go to who won the last Maine governor election. It was Janet Mills. It was by a lot. And in 2026, they're having this race as pretty sizable advantage for the Democrats. So Maine is now in the blue category. Maine is the first state to be eliminated. But it's not the only one, because just like Maine only got in because of a Republican senator, Virginia only got in because of a Republican governor. Because the Senate, it's still an advantage for Republicans. And look at the House of Delegates. 2023, Democrats won it back after 2021 when Republicans flipped the Virginia House of Delegates. And furthermore, they have 2 Democratic senators in office that won re-election by a fair amount in both cases. One of which even survived an ultra blue red wave. And looking at the presidential elections, Harris wins by a bit. Biden wins by double digits before that when he won the election. And even in Clinton's loss, still wins Virginia by a lot. Virginia was at one point, one of the core-deciding swing states. Like 2012, it was a core-deciding swing state. Back when Maine was solid Democrat. 2008, it was a, important swing state. But not anymore. Virginia has been found and has been eliminated. Finally, Minnesota. Minnesota is often close in elections, but it still always goes Democrat. And there's a few sayings in life, one of which is that Minnesota is just always going to vote blue. Looking at the Minnesota gubernatorial election. Again, it's a big win for Tim Walz. Looking at the Minnesota Senate election in 2022, you have Democrats flipping the chamber from Republicans, and they don't go for re-election. And in 2022, the Minnesota House of Representatives, the Minnesota House of Representatives, oh, you've gotta be kidding me. Again, it's remained in Democratic hands. Now, 2024, it's actually 67-67 tie. And it's actually 67-66 right now. So there's a special election pending. So Minnesota does have a Republican House, but it might go to split House after this. I mean, we genuinely don't know what's going to happen. And with two, and again, with two Democratic senators in Minnesota, two Democratic senators in Minnesota, I am forced to call this with it being a blowout. Minnesota has been eliminated. But that still leaves a lot of contenders. New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona. So all these states we have moved on to Tier 2. Because they're all, these are, for the most part, the back and forth states. And there are two exceptions. New Hampshire, North Carolina. Both of which consistently vote for one party. Now, this is where we have to get into other nitty-gritty layers of government. But, looking at the past couple years, New Hampshire has elected 2 Democratic senators. North Carolina elected 2 Republicans. But notice how New Hampshire's margins are always more of a landslide than North Carolina's margins. On the other hand, though, there's also the point of government. The North Carolina gubernatorial election, we saw Democrats keep the race that Roy Cooper had in a landslide. And it's gone even more favorable for Democrats. But the North Carolina House of Representatives, Republicans have a sizable 71-49 advantage. In the North Carolina Senate election, 30-20, sizable advantage. Meanwhile, looking at the New Hampshire gubernatorial election, it's like everyone was saying Sununu would leave, and all of a sudden it would turn because Sununu was just immensely popular in the state. But nope, Kelly Ayotte still holds the seat. And in the New Hampshire House of Representatives election, we see Republicans have a 222-178 majority. In the New Hampshire Senate election, we see Republicans have a 16-8 supermajority. So they really expanded on their majority. So these are really favorable to them. But New Hampshire's weird because then everything else. And again, New Hampshire has been prone to blowouts before. At least North Carolina can always keep it close. And New Hampshire oftentimes struggles too. But it's weird because in the end, North Carolina may be close, but we always know who's going to win the race. The Republicans always went on top. In New Hampshire, it's weird because you don't know where they're going to go. But even though it's like statewide level Republican, on a national scale, it's a Democratic state. So it's a tilt Democrat state. In North Carolina, I would say it's a tilt Republican state. again, Democrats can win in North Carolina, but they got to prove it. And so far, they've only done so in the governorship. And why is Kansas here? This also means that per protocol, Minnesota, Virginia, Maine get bumped up. So now you're kind of down to our core 6 swing states. And everyone knew it was going to be this way. So, where do we go from here? And where we go from here is very tough. Looking at the gubernatorial elections, all these remaining states elected governors in 2022. Nevada voted Republican. Georgia voted Republican. Arizona was very narrowly Democrat, and in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, all Democrat. And Michigan and Pennsylvania were actually not close elections. I mean, Maine, Connecticut, and Illinois were all less of a blowout than Pennsylvania was. And even Michigan, Minnesota, New Mexico, and New York were all closer. All states that, you wouldn't think of as swing states. But then again, be careful. Even Kansas has a Democratic governor, and Vermont elected the Republican governor in a 47-point blowout when Vermont might be the most Democratic state in the country. So be careful looking at these results. Looking at the Senate races of these, Nevada, you could tell, 2 blue senators. Arizona, you can tell, 2 blue senators. Actually, this is the map where you could tell, but again, all of these are blue. And this is also blue. Georgia, you can tell, 2 blue senators. But meanwhile, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania reveal splits. But Michigan reveals 2 blue senators. So now, it's very tough. Because we know who the governors are in these states. We need to know what the Congresses are like in these states. And, looking at the legislative elections of these states, just looking at this chart, it reveals a few things. Michigan, Republicans control the House 58-52, flipping it from 2022, which itself was a flip. So they flipped the Michigan House of Representatives back into Republican control. Nevada, the Senate is 13-8. The Assembly is 27-15, and after 2022, it was actually Democratic supermajority at 28-14. So they could have overridden a veto by Laxalt, but I don't think they had the numbers in the Senate to do that. Actually, wait, no, Adam Laxalt isn't the governor of Nevada. Wait, I'm stupid. The governor of Nevada is Joe Lombardo. Because Laxalt wouldn't win. Looking at the results in Pennsylvania, 28-22 for Republican House, but 102-101 for Democratic House. It's 2022 in the Senate, I meant. Wisconsin, 18-15 in the Senate, significantly narrows up. Assembly also narrows up, 54-45. And Arizona is a 17-13 Republican Senate and a 33-27 Republican House after the last election, where they only had a 1-seat majority. Again, it's ultra tough. All 6 states you could make the argument for. Which states do we eliminate? I'm thinking the first one, I think, on the chopping block might be Nevada. And here's my logic. Nevada has a complete Democratic Congress, and by a lot on a statewide level. And even though they voted for Trump, it was a bit of a landslide election. Although looking at swing states, it actually did have a lean towards Trump, which is a bit of a good to know. Nonetheless, I mean, 2 Democratic senators, and it would be a Democratic trifecta. If not for that, I mean, I gotta put it there. Georgia was also a state that leaned towards Trump, and it has 2 Democratic senators, but that's kind of about it. And it was a Democratic favorable national environment in both times. Given that you have a Republican trifecta on a statewide level, seeing as it's 33-23 in a Georgia Senate and 180 in a Georgia House, I'm putting them in the lean Republican category. I think that they are a more Republican-leaning state. This also means that New Hampshire and North Carolina got to get bumped up. And we really got to bump up Minnesota, Virginia, and Maine. That leaves 4 states left, and Colorado is certainly not one of them. Go away. And again, all these states you could truly make a case for, and I'm actually going to put Michigan in the other category, because even though 16 they did vote for Trump, they always have voted. They voted to the left of the nation, and you still have 2 Democratic senators. It's no longer a Democrat trifecta in Michigan, but it's still 2 out of 3 a Democrat. So I would say that gives it, a huge case to make it be a Democratic-leaning state. And I would say that, if I had to categorize them, like Arizona, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, some of the toughest to characterize, the others, I would have an easier case. And Arizona is so tough, a lot of it also comes down to Arizona not only voting for Trump, but doing so by over 5%, as you saw on the map. But it did vote Democrat before, and it has 2 Democratic senators. Then you have the case of the Democratic governor and the Democratic and a Republican Congress. Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, though, have split senators. So this is where it gets intense. Because if you're looking at it on a Senate advantage, it would seemingly go in favor of this for their classifications. And you look at it on a governor's advantage, and they're all blue. But look at it on a congressional level, and you have red Arizona and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania is split by its different things. So now it's truly tough to say. How do you weight this? How do you weight this? And here's what I would say. In both Wisconsin and Arizona, it's just a Democratic governor. Pennsylvania, you throw in a Democratic House as well. And, you might say, look at it's only a 1-seat majority, but nonetheless, a majority is a majority. You could look at Cook PVI, Republican +2 for Pennsylvania, Republican +2 for Wisconsin, but Republican +2 for Arizona. And again, truly even actually would probably lean towards Democrat, just because of the fact that Democrats won the 2 presidential elections net by 1.5%. Considering that the Democratic-leaning Michigan and Nevada are Republican +1 at this point. And now actually the Pennsylvania is 101 because of a vacancy. Considering Matt Gurgley's tragic passing. But they're still in the majority party. So, now it's truly tough to say what's the biggest swing state. And here's how I look at it. The way I look at it is that Arizona has always been more blue, always been more red than the others, and in this election, you could see compare the numbers. Even with 2 Democratic senators, I would say it does tilt Republican. And the only reason why Democrats really even won the governorship in Arizona was because Republicans put up a far-right extremist. 2024, though, you see Arizona voted for Trump by a lot. Wisconsin was the narrowest. And then Pennsylvania. And it's so weird to cross between elections too. But again, Pennsylvania's got a blue edge over Wisconsin. And I think that leaves Wisconsin as the ultimate swing state. We just gotta change the margins for everything else so you could see how every state stacks up. And again, these are your tiers of swing states, in my opinion. But I think Wisconsin is the ultimate swing state. You can even look in the last 3 elections. It was always within 1% when it voted. No other state has always been within 1%. The 1% states, it was the only one this year. In 2020, Georgia and Arizona are also 1% states. And the year before that, it was New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. But they were the only ones to consistently vote under 3%. And I think that for that reason, it's the ultimate swing state. Because every other state, I think, it might be easy or it might be hard, but you can classify them as Republican or Democrat. And I think Wisconsin is the toughest one.